So, you ready to go?
I'm ready when you are.
Hi, I'm Tommy,
And I'm Dante.
and you're listening to Twigging Onto Twig, a podcast where we talk about Wildbow's most tranquil web serial, Twig.
In today's episode, we're talking about Lips Sealed 3.7 and 3.8. And before we get any further, I'd like to introduce our very special guest, host of Decomposing Worm, Do the Right Thing, and a couple other things. It is Alexandra.
Hi, y'all. Glad to be here.
Happy
Welcome.
to have you.
Yeah, I'm excited about this. I was excited when y'all first started talking about doing this podcast. Twig is my favorite of Wildbow's works, and I've been always really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I think you've mentioned doing a Twig podcast at some point. So.
Yeah. Nothing to announce at this point, but when it does eventually get made, it'll be called Dissecting Twig, and it's been a long time dream just because it's my favorite work. I just love the characters a lot.
So following the Decomposing Worm.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Excellent. And you said you've read the whole thing a few times now.
Yeah, at least 2.5-ish. The half is just like the sort of times I would read an arc or two to catch up on something. I think I read it mostly when it first came out, and then I reread it once or twice after that, I think.
Did you follow Twig as it's released?
It's so when I first read Worm, I read Worm, and then Twig is what was being written at the time when I finished it. And so I think I read all the way. I caught up to Twig as it was finishing, I believe, before Wildbow had moved on to Ward. Which was a really cool experience. It was the second work I read after Worm. I didn't read Pact in between.
And have you read Pact since?
Yeah. I'm all topped up on Bow stuff. I'm out of Bow stuff to read. All checked out.
Right. So, Dante, do you want to talk about the audiobook summaries? These are yours.
Yes. So the audiobook summaries for these chapters. Lips Sealed 3.7. Will Sai finally get his precious answers about Sub Rosa in this chapter? Who knows? But in the meantime, there's a pretty neat little bit of foreshadowing in this chapter. I won't tell you what it is, but have fun guessing. Alexandra, I'm sure you know what it is.
There's a lot. I mean, it depends on what you. Yeah, I think I could guess to what specifically it's referring to. Actually, now that I think about it.
Okay, I'm going to make Tommy guess, but later, because there's a second part of the description, which is a warning. In this chapter, Sai describes an accent as German, possibly, or Dutch. Obviously, what he really means is vaguely Russian or French-sounding one. The only defense I can offer for this little atrocity is that Sai has a terrible ear for accents anyway.
So I presume the narrator ended up doing a Russian or French sounding accent by accident.
This is very German accent.
That sounds more Bulgarian to me, but sure.
Yes. Anyway, and then in contrast to that multiple paragraph summary, chapter 3.8 is simply, if you like Helen, this is a good chapter for you.
Very true.
Is the smiley face with the starry eyes part of the description?
No, I put that in because I do like Helen, and it was a very good chapter for me.
Very true.
So, before we dive into the rest of the episode, we are going to immediately date this episode very much, because Claw has come out. The first chapter of Wildbow's new web serials, which is a short crime novel set in contemporary Alberta.
Yeah, he says short, and nobody believes him because that's what he said about Pale.
Well, we'll cross fingers for him. I'm sure it's a struggle that I don't know. It's a challenge he's setting, I'm sure.
Yeah,
maybe. But I mean, like with Pale, he was going to do a short one, but then he enjoyed it so much he made it a long one. And
that's true.
If he finds himself really enjoying writing Claw, then
okay.
I hope he enjoys writing Claw a lot.
So obviously we have to make him writing Claw an atrocious experience. That's what he needs to achieve his own goals. We're really helping him, right? Oh God.
I feel like the approach to treating Claw versus Pale as a short novel is very different. Wildbow, from what I've heard and what he said, coming off of Ward was not motivated about writing and was trying to find
Mm.
that spark, whereas coming off of Pale is a very different experience, and doesn't have to have that. Is not trying to rekindle something.
Yeah. It's a very interesting thing to talk about Wildbow's particular like structures.
Mhm.
It's something that I'm very excited to hear and to discuss about with Twig, particularly as you get like way further on and contrasting it with some of the other works, because it's a very different. It's very interesting seeing him experiment with different structures. Um,
Yeah, that's something that he said explicitly about Twig to us
yeah,
at some point. That Twig was very much an experiment in how arcs are structured. So that's something
yeah.
we are looking at or trying to keep our eye on as we go through.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. It's something that I've kind of been kicking around in my head, and I don't have a full like answer to this at all. But it's like it seems like a lot of his works. Worm has the best climax, I think, out of like the most like cohesive and planned, and like everything comes together. And all the other climaxes are fantastic too. But it seems like the emphasis has shifted away from that culmination
Mhm.
that it was in Worm over to more of those long form, like enjoying the journey kind of structures, which I found very interesting as a difference. And I think it'll be particularly interesting to keep that in mind as y'all read Twig and observe its own structure and the changes that he makes as he figures it out, this slightly different structure.
Mhm.
Um,
One
yeah.
thing that I think is interesting about Twig is having read Worm and Pact, both of which are very fast paced
Mhm.
and big action climax works, and having read Ward and Pale, which are the slower, more contemplative type works,
Mhm.
and Twig is right in the middle
Oh yeah,
as
right,
the
right in between
transition.
that transition period. Yeah, yeah, especially.
Yeah, so we're kind of seeing
The transition.
the transition and the kind of bridging the gap there as we're
Yeah,
reading through it, which is very interesting to me.
yeah. I have a lot more thoughts to say on it, but I can't say without spoiling exactly when the structure shifts and stuff like that. So I'm going to avoid. But when you all get there, I would love
We'll
to
have to have you
talk
back
about more.
later
Yeah,
Yep,
to talk about it then.
definitely.
Speaking of things that happen in the plot, shall we get into our chapter summaries?
yeah. Go for it.
Sure.
Previously on Twig, Sub Rosa is releasing all the monsters in the bowels of the Academy, and the Lambs, along with several Academy scientists, including Gordon's new beau, Gladys Shipman, are running away through the pipes in the ceiling.
In Lips Sealed 3.7, the lambs, particularly Helen, fight off some small monsters called wall crawlers. Most of the lambs and scientists get stung by Gladys's bugs and injected with tranquilizing venom. They quickly take shelter in an abandoned lab where most of them succumb to the venom and fall unconscious, with Helen, Cy, and Jamie the only ones left standing, and they go off to see what they can do.
Then in Lips Sealed 3.8, Helen, Cy, and Jamie discuss their options, then head off into the depths. They, and particularly Helen, fight off some more wall crawlers, this time using something that burns them when they attack. They head to a lab, which Jamie remembers as a large vial of gas containing flesh-eating virus that they can use to herd Sub Rosa. Cy promises not to drop it, and pretty much immediately drops it. Then they head down to find Sub Rosa. They find her on the bottom floor, forcing scientists to excavate for something. So one of the scientists tries to herd them away before Sub Rosa notices them, but that attracts Sub Rosa's attention. She sees them before they can set up their virus trap, and they run away with Sub Rosa hot on their heels.
Dum dum dum.
Dun dun dun.
We should probably get like the hamster sound
Oh,
effect, since we do that every single time.
Yeah, get
Good.
the actual or instrumentation for it.
Yes. So first of all, Tommy, what foreshadowing do you think Kimberly Dauber is referring to in
Um,
3.7?
it's obviously Gordon and Gladys's wedding. Um, no, but more seriously, I'm assuming it has something to do with Jamie, and just we learn a lot about the. I don't remember Jamie. Oh, Caterpillar.
hmm
Was Caterpillar? Was
Yeah,
that
Project Caterpillar. Yeah.
Project Caterpillar? we learn a lot about Project Caterpillar, and at least not its purpose necessarily, but how it was executed. So I'm assuming that is the big thing that is foreshadowed, and don't tell me if I'm right, but I am.
Okay.
Like the confidence.
Yeah.
Neutral response.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. What's your next note?
So you put this in there, Dante, but I also mentioned it in the sci section, so I'm feeling free to leap into it. Just that 3.8 is very much Jamie dealing with like the impending mortality, both his own and Sai acting in ways that don't necessarily preserve his own self.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was very interesting. So y'all asked me on these particular episodes, and I was excited because I remembered the near death scene being around here. And I was a little disappointed that it wasn't quite in this section, but that's okay. I'm going to talk about it anyway.
Please do.
But yeah, that section where was it 3.6 or it was very recently anyway.
It was, last
where Sai gets grabbed by Sub Rosa and is about to have his head bashed in, and he just accepts it and goes limp. And he like all of the lambs are kind of freaked out by how he like didn't fight back as best as he could, and he like acted really stupidly. And I find that part very, very interesting, and I feel like you can kind of tell that it has a bit of an impact on Sai.
Yeah, and obviously on Jamie.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, we kind of glossed right over that because we're just like, oh, Sai is getting in scraps all the time and taking risks all the time. And
that's true, but this time he like
time.
accepted it. He talks about that the allure of accepting death quite a bit, and even it shows up in this too. He like turns to Jamie. He's like, I never want to feel that ever again. And he does mean it, but it's like very clearly like something that I think shook him on some level. There's quite a bit of narration in 3.6 that goes on about him of like how it sort of sickens him how like much he kind of wanted it, I think.
If I may read the quote real quick. The memory of the tranquility I'd experienced at Sub Rosa's hands was still uncomfortable, ominous, and alluring.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he uses that word a lot, alluring, when he talks about it.
Just the
I guess it's a good choice of word, by the way, for the words for this particular set of chapters. That it's a very tranquil set of chapters, because that's how he describes it. It's an alluring, deathly tranquility.
Just I guess the idea that he has no control at all, and that nothing he can do.
Yeah,
it's I don't know if freeing is the right word, because
it's like surrender or submission.
Yeah.
Submission to imminent death.
I just picked tranquil because it was referring to the tranquilizer and the mosquitoes. But that's an excellent coincidence.
Thematic parallels, yeah.
For it.
And I mean, I feel like the entire or most of 3.8 has a bit of a. I don't want to repeat the word tranquil, but I will. Despite the fact that they're fighting these wall crawlers, it never feels like they're in imminent danger. The purpose of that is to give some punctuation to the conversation that they're having. Amy, Sai, and Helen.
Yeah, they're sort of drunk, right, through most of it from the tranquilizer. At least Sai is somewhat, although he's really bad at noticing it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I'm figuring out how y'all want to structure this. There's other things I want to talk about, but I don't know if you want to...
This part's pretty freeform. Feel free to talk about
fair
whatever.
Enough. Well, if y'all actually would like to talk about specifically the conversation with Jamie, I think that's a particularly interesting section. So I put up some quotes, and y'all did too. So the Sai is talking about how one way to stop Sub Rosa is that one of them will sacrifice themselves. He's very callous about suggesting it, and I think I can recognize that Sai, like, he says a lot of things to put it out there to see how other people react, and then talks about it later.
It's that attitude of like, it's a joke only if it lands as a joke. If not, it's like a serious suggestion.
Yeah, fair enough.
Just kidding, unless.
Right. You've left that comment on what about manipulating some poor sap into doing it for us.
Yeah.
which is like it also was kind of like, yeah, you know what, Sai, that's actually not a bad idea. Better than one of the lambs, right? I'm sure they could find an acceptable sacrifice target, right? Just some guy who sucks. Just like think about how many people are in the battle. There's a guy who sucks in there for sure.
There's probably more than one guy who
Yeah,
sucks
there's
down
plenty
there.
of guys who suck. Anyway,
You know it's going to be Gladys, though, right?
not a bad idea. I mean, like that would be the best target, but it's interesting though. He's in this conversation, and Jamie's getting emotional about it and saying like, "No, none of us are going to sacrifice ourselves. You're not allowed to do that." And there's this repeated motif in the narration where Sai like basically says, "I can't like talk. I can't avoid the question." Because there will be social consequences if I do. And it's not at all like, oh, I should confide in Jamie about these emotions I'm feeling and how I feel complicated. I should like reassure him. It's like we need to get through this. And so I will like do it's almost like manipulation, except it's like, intentional and like for his friends at the same time. It's an interesting thing that comes up. But
Well, I just want to add to that.
mhm.
When Jamie admits to Sai that he did not recognize Sub Rosa and that he
Yeah.
should have, Sai's, I wasn't sure what to say, and that's a big thing for Sai to be
Mhm.
admitting, even to himself.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like it's interesting there because like he sort of manipulates Jamie into telling him about that. I mean, not in like a bad way, but just like he uses the fact that he just told Jamie about his like his emotional draw to death and how scared he is of
Yeah,
that. And then he uses that. He's like, I told you my inner thoughts. So like
you
tell
owe
me
me.
what's going on. Yeah, you owe me. Uses that social capital immediately. Um and then yeah, he doesn't know what to say, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I feel like this back and forth of vulnerability starts in 3.7 rather than
Mhm.
3.8 when they're
Yeah.
looking over each other for the bug bites.
Yeah, that's a very intimate, like little thing. Have they done that before, by the way?
No, I think explicitly Sai, when they're in the orphanage, I think it's at the beginning of this arc, Jamie asks Sai to look away when he changes. And
Right.
Sai like doesn't joke about peeking or anything. It just looks away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have this closeness that he doesn't like Jamie. I think will allow like Lillian to look him over or something, or
Mhm.
perhaps Helen, just because like Helen is like the alien in that way
Yeah.
that he doesn't mind too much. Although I don't know if that happens, but like Sai is like, I mean, I don't think he allows Gordon to, and I think he would like feel weird if Lillian was doing it in any other context than like a medical one.
Yeah, definitely.
But he allows Sai just because they're besties like that.
Yes, they're so great.
They are. I think it's. I think you left a comment in here too about like why these particular lambs are the ones that are chosen to stay awake for this section.
Mhm.
And I thought that was an interesting question. I don't know if y'all had particular thoughts of that already.
Well,
Yeah.
you brought
I
this.
just tossed it in there because I was like, it's interest. I thought it was interesting that they had, split like they Wildbow splits the party frequently, but
Right.
usually it's like these ones are going to do this, those ones are going to do that, and there's very much an emphasis on all of the lambs working together and all of them needing each other. And here he just takes three of them out of the picture entirely for this whole chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, what is it specifically about these three that makes it important in this chapter? And I was kind of thinking, like, just based on at the beginning of the chapter, Sai is saying, depending on who is part of our trio here, I'd adjust my strategy. And he talks about what he would do if it was Gordon, what he would do if it was Lillian, what he would do if it was Mary. And I think that with all of them, they were very kind of like fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And very action oriented, whereas these three are very not action oriented.
Well,
even Helen, who
I was going to say that's interesting to talk about Helen that way, considering she is.
Like her focus is on physical stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you were saying in a previous episode, I think, Tommy, that that even though Helen has shown that she's very good at like sort of physical action and fighting and stuff like that, that we haven't really seen her do a lot of that. It's
Yeah. She's
No.
more of
because that's
an
not
ambush
her.
predator, it
Yeah,
seems like.
exactly.
Yeah.
She's not a frontline fighter at all. She's just
She's not
like,
Gorger.
yeah. She's the
Mhm.
one that if you get alone with her, she beats you. But if it's like in a crowd or you otherwise like have a weapon, then she's not very effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Gordon and Mary are very much like, hit first and ask questions later type characters.
Yeah, because I mean, Helen, we said the her point or what she seems to be, maybe not, it's not what she's designed, but what she seems to be interested in is passing as a human, being able to infiltrate and be quote unquote normal.
Yeah, she's very interesting in this chapter. There's several things she does that surprised me on a reread that I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that Helen was like this, is particularly like this early on. But she like seems to fill in the gaps for the other lambs just like Sai does. Like Sai kind of
Mhm.
is dropping the ball with like comforting Jamie. Maybe
didn't
not
catch
dropping
that.
the ball, but like not doing very well. And then Helen is like goes over and gives Jamie a kiss on the cheek because she can recognize that he needs something physical right now. He needs some sort of reassurance. And she kind of instinctually can see that. She's the first one to offer hugs, pretty much,
That's
I
true.
think, and kisses on the cheek and
Mhm.
jokes for Sai's benefit and things like that.
When I pulled away, I saw that Helen was stroking his hair, patting him like a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's good at that.
Yeah. She's
Well,
been studying really hard.
yeah, another thing that I did find interesting is that while they're like trying to escape, they're trying to find suggestions or solutions for things. And several times, like Helen remarks on particular ideas, and Sai kind of dismisses them, which I thought was kind
Mhm.
of weird. Um, like Helen's like, shame we didn't have paint
Yeah.
because bright colors would save us, and Sai's like, I wouldn't help with we have to be sneaky, and a couple other things. It's like, okay, well, Sai, maybe just play in the space for a minute. Maybe it
Yeah.
would be fun to have paint. Maybe they not either. Maybe just like I don't know. He feels a little tiny bit condescending to Helen a couple times.
Well, we've talked about
And,
this
and
before.
also, they also didn't do a very good job of being sneaky anyway.
No, they didn't. They were screaming. Like,
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, Sai and Helen, and how it feels like Sai doesn't know what to make of Helen, really.
yeah,
She doesn't slot easily into his structure of the lambs and the group. He cares for her as much as he cares for the other lambs, but he tries to put her in this little box, and she's constantly not in that box, and
Mhm.
it
mhm.
frustrates him. And he never really acknowledges it. At least he hasn't so far. But he's always talking about like, oh, Helen, you know, doing this for other people's sake, and it's like she's maybe, but she's also
Mhm.
probably doing it for her own sake and
Mhm.
her own place within the lambs. And
I feel like if she were any other person, or like any quote unquote normal person, he might be right in interpreting her that way.
yeah,
And he's like, he's good at reading people, or he thinks he is, and he's going to read her the same way, but it doesn't apply to her. Because,
Mhm.
like we saw in these chapters, everything about her is slightly different.
yeah, her
And
skin and her brain.
mhm,
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I think a big part of it is that she's like an excellent actress, but also doesn't always totally understand people in the same way that Sai does, but also understands them more in other ways.
Mhm.
It's interesting.
yes.
She's very id, I feel like a lot of the time. And motivated by wants and stuff.
Huh.
Or noticing physical desires and things like that.
I can see that.
But maybe that's projecting the animal interpretation that Sai has.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm trying to decide if I agree with you on that. I don't
I feel like
know.
growing up in the
Do?
bowels with like a large variety of different creatures and
Mhm.
scientists and stuff, then I could see her like kind of being better able to relate to them on the sort of things that they all have in common.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Learning animals just as much as she has learned people. It's not
That's
that she's
true.
more animalistic. It's just she has learned that language like she learned the language that she
Yeah,
uses to operate
exactly.
around people.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting to note as things go, about how like people like to everyone else she's a little girl, and then to the people who know her most she's like not that, but like it's kind of, I don't know, sometimes it seems like it's in a way that kind of takes away her humanity,
Yeah.
that she does still have it. Yeah, I think it's something I won't say too much, especially of like when you should keep note on this, but it's something that I think it's
Always.
worth watching, particularly with just the different people that are involved with her.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Which ones treat her like, well, like she's human, and which ones don't.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, we already know that, well, it seems so far that her creator, her father, does not treat her as human, but also does not treat her as an animal, just treats her as a
Object,
project, an object.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is really great for a patriarchal figure to be treating his essentially daughter figure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Nice one, Ibit.
Yep.
Good
He
guy.
does treat everyone like objects, though.
That is true. That is true. I mean,
So,
he
at
does
least it's not
slap
personal.
children the second that we see him. That's like the first thing he does.
Yes.
It's a character-defining moment.
Hmm. Lovely fella. Maybe he should have been shoved off the staircase and turned into a
kind of,
monster.
probably.
Speaking of the staircase in there, they go down to the 8th floor and are excavating. I'm curious what they're excavating for. Alexandra, I'm sure you know what they're digging for.
To be honest, it's a really big work, and I don't quite remember.
Sure. I don't remember either. So
Well, they're digging for the super monster that Ibit has that's under the bowels.
That makes sense.
honestly, I think that's the most tempting assumption to make
Mhm.
in this moment is that was thereafter.
It could be that she was just trying to get out as well. I don't quite remember what Sub Rosa's
I feel like if you're
hole
trying to get out
across
of the
the earth
bowels,
in
go.
China?
Sorry, what did you say?
Dig a hole straight down and come out in China?
Yeah, which is obviously
you're-
not
you're
taken over by
going
the
in
crown
wrong
yet.
direction.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the purpose is. I also find it funny the whole idea of dropping the flesh-eating virus with all the scientists down there. Just like, nah, fuck them.
Uh-huh.
They probably deserved it anyway.
Yeah, honestly, probably.
Yeah.
Yep.
But, like, at the very least, it's something in Tweet that's interesting is that, like, you could pretty much assume that anyone involved with the Academy is an acceptable target. Like,
The other side of that is that I assume that the assumption is that anybody down there is already basically dead.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the assumption that the Academy is operating under, or at least that we think the Academy is operating under. It's a lockdown, clean, sanitize, destroy, and then open it
Yeah.
up again.
yeah, whoever's alive lives. Whoever dies, dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the only other thing that I really had to say about the plot was how it ends with Sai going from 20 minutes to build a death trap for Sub Rosa to 0 minutes.
I mean, that's what he's been practicing for his whole life with all these Rube Goldberg machines and that
He
he's developed.
does love a Rube Goldberg machine, doesn't he?
Oh yeah.
I have to say, when it pays off, it is so satisfying.
That's true. He does it from like the very start. Like I just reread Arc 1, and he does it like twice within that arc at least.
Mhm.
I mean, the first chapter we see him set one up with
Yeah, with the water and and Thomas.
boy and
or
yeah.
Tom.
Yeah.
It's funny.
It's like his defining introduction moment.
Yes.
He's so fun.
Yeah. So can't wait to see how he pulls that off.
Yep. So moving on to the general world building, I thought it was interesting to learn that maybe the Academy's culture is kind of unique to this Academy, which is a bit surprising. I kind of assumed that the backstabby cutthroatiness of the whole was part and parcel of the whole system.
Yeah, I did as well.
Though I guess it's
I
probably
still kind of think it is.
it kind of
to be
yeah. I mean,
honest.
it's the kind of thing that just develops organically in rigid academia.
Yeah, it would be an interesting thing to look at. Gladys's statement that it's like all this woman's fault and stuff
Yeah.
like that is just like, no, like all this stuff was there before and still is after. Actually,
That's
like
true.
guys like, oh, it got better, and it's like, no,
Has it though?
it's really not. She says as she's like
Yeah.
succumbing to her own venoms, and these like killer children are running around trying to save her.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we from when we see. I put it down, and when we talk about in the character section about the other scientists, but we can easily talk about it here. Um, Immediately, the other scientists are deflecting blame about why their particular project is not,
Mm,
what the academy needed. They're looking to deflect it so that, and maybe it is institutionally left over from when Sub Rosa was in charge, but it also just feels like everything we've heard about the academy. It seems like there's too much institutional momentum for that to be just on one person.
yeah, it's in the first chapter. The quote from the snake charmer going, like this. This is what the academy has done. You have to have experiments. You have to like join them to catch up. Otherwise, they keep making changes and great strides and discoveries keep being made and will be left behind if you don't catch up. So I definitely think that's like an overall academy thing, and I don't think that's a spoiler to say.
No.
Yeah. So then I wonder if this attitude and culture was there already. What would Sub Rosa have done to?
I mean, it could just be that Gladys is, has her uncle's perspective, neither of whom are
You think
entirely reliable narrators.
So maybe Gladys's uncle was doing well under the previous management and was successfully backstabbing all of his colleagues. But then Sub Rosa came into power and was like, "No, I'm onto you," and shoved him back down into his place.
It's yeah, exactly. It feels like office politics that ends with the implication of murder.
I would definitely have enjoyed The Office a lot more if that was
that worked. That's a show that needs to happen. There's an office comedy with murder, yes,
biopunk horror, and that's just like the bit is that they have all these horrible things with Frankenstein monsters and stuff.
I was going to say it's also that the mirror universe episode of Star Trek where you murder your way up the command chain.
I
didn't know about that. That sounds fun.
Yeah, the in the original series when they get accidentally sent to a mirror universe where everybody is evil and Spock has a goatee. That's the origin. The person has a goatee. Yeah,
that's amazing.
The way up the command structure is to murder the person ahead of you.
Classic.
Yep.
Yeah, see, they would fit it right in here.
Exactly.
In terms of the locations, we're still just in the bowels, but we've learned a lot more about them. I thought it was really interesting that, like, when we were talking about the security measures in the bowels, we were all kind of assuming that it was to protect the people outside from the monsters.
Hold things released. In.
Yes. But no, it's designed to protect the projects that are in there from enemies invading.
How far is Radom from the front lines?
Good question.
They're just super paranoid.
Yeah, I mean, it could well be. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question to keep in mind. Like, who are they afraid of, particularly coming in and taking things? Particularly when I don't believe, especially at this point, that like any of those front lines have actually been described. Like, I don't think any particular enemy has been named, right?
I think Maurer was like his interlude had them fighting the Mexicans.
Right.
Oh yeah.
I think, but I'm not certain. But the other possibility, Gladys talks about how people started, cutting ethics to meet standards, and there's a month and blah blah blah. They got test subjects, even children. They got test subjects from Radom, not the academy, but the city. Lillian said, even children. Gladys said, my uncle was so torn up about it. Friends of his, they did it, starting with the elderly, but then, etc. They could just be protecting against a mob.
Right. The people.
Yeah.
Yes, considering how much effort they're putting into still trying to root out Maurer's possible influence.
Exactly, yeah. That could be part and parcel of the same kind of
Mhm.
culture.
I do think that a mob seems to be more likely of a danger to Radham than,
It would fit the aesthetic themes of
Absolutely.
Frankenstein's monster and all that.
yeah.
That is true.
But a mob wouldn't. Uh, Mobs are usually not organized unless they're like directed by Mauer or something. But they wouldn't like be infiltrating.
No, they'd just be swarming
They
through
would just be
everything that's
swarming.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So
God, imagining a mob of people like going through the battles and just getting like picked off by every single thing. Did y'all see Cabin in the Woods?
Yes, it's exactly. I was
Yeah, I'm
thinking that
picturing the
too.
end of Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Cabin in the Woods, Dante?
no, but
It is a
you
deconstruction.
continue to riff on it if you like.
It's quite good, and
Yeah. I think it's fair to talk about it with spoilers, considering it's like 15 years old now.
um
We'll give the spoiler warning as
Yeah.
usual, and
I mean, we don't really need to talk about it. Just at the end, this organization that's been killing college students in horror movies every year using different horror movie monsters has all the horror movie monsters released into their lab or into their compound.
perfect.
Yeah.
which is like a modern day Twig thing, or
Yeah.
SCP
Very
Foundation,
much so.
or whatever. I feel
Yeah.
like it all would suit.
Mhm.
Honestly, it also feels very otherversy.
Oh, of course, naturally. All
Everything
horror movie
does,
monsters are.
It's just an entire area full of boogeymen.
What else do you need to talk about?
So I also wanted to talk about the Helen describing some of the measures to open the thing up, and just teams of stitched at a wheel and a switchboard. Need the right configuration on the board for a given tunnel, or it locks up when you order the stitch to turn the wheel, and only certain individuals can order the stitched. I felt that was a weird combination of like high tech and not, like using your Frankenstein monsters to turn a wheel like you would like a donkey on a mill
Yeah.
feels like a really clumsy way of doing whatever you're trying to be doing. I'm not
Yes.
necessarily sure I'm articulating what I want to
yeah,
articulate well.
absolutely. It's a strange thing. Like you'd expect like a, I don't know, not like a biocomputer, but something close. But instead, it's this very almost medieval way of
Yeah.
opening the bowels.
It's like you almost picture a guy standing over it with a whip and people in like
Yes.
rags pushing the wheel.
Well,
Yeah.
especially considering how like mostly automatic the security
rest of the
measures
valves.
are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You just like decide that it's a lockdown and things slide into place.
Mhm.
Like it's
Well, it doesn't even seem like you decide there's a lockdown. It's like something breaks out and
yes.
automatic things slam shut.
So now I'm kind of imagining that there's like all these stitch that are just like built into the walls and
Just
all
like
their
push the door shut.
yes,
Oh my
exactly.
god!
Yeah.
The funny thing is that would not be out of character for this place either.
It certainly wouldn't. That's creepy as hell.
It's like cheaper that way, right?
Yes.
And they can't get
Reminds-
wet. They're ensconced in concrete.
Mhm.
So you never need to replace them.
Yeah, honestly, best place for them.
Yep.
Imagine there's like your cousin in the wall next to you. So you find out.
Grim.
Yep.
Forbidden romance between a scientist and the stitch that opens the door for him. Just the longing.
Just the
Or perhaps
imbalance of power there, but there's not even imbalance of power.
or you could make it really tragic. They were past lovers, right? But terrible circumstances tore them apart. She hated the academy, and he went into the academy, and she eventually got stitched and put into the same lab that he works at. He doesn't even know, but she can see him every day as he passes through the crack in the wall.
Oh.
And she remembers just a bit of her past life and longs for him, even still.
Opens the door just that much more efficiently for him.
Yes.
I know there's a dime store novel with that premise in this.
Oh, absolutely. It's so tragic and beautiful.
Yes. Isn't that sort of like what we were initially speculating Sub Rosa's deal was?
Yes, that is actually.
That was why Shipman had brought her back, because he was,
she
was someone important to him.
I feel like Twig kind of constantly has like psychosexual stuff going on, even though Wildbow actually does a really fantastic job of not going directly there. So I don't think that you like kidnap your boss and then turn them into a horrific monster over the course of like a decade without having like a thing for them. I feel like
Just revenge.
it's no, like that's like you particularly like you enjoy corrupting and like making them monstrous. Like that's definitely like I don't know if I would go so far to claim as it's sexual just outright, but like there's something more there.
Yeah, the initial shove off the balcony maybe is just petty revenge, and it's like, oh, now I can do something with this.
Right.
Mhm. Speaking of Sub Rosa, shall we move on to our
Sure.
monster corner with our soundbite by Megafire and Danny Elfman?
Okay.
Yes. Have you heard the soundbite?
Not yet. I think I'd missed that in the last episode.
Okay. Here, let me grab it and I'll play it. Oh,
Thank God! I can't not hear it for this.
Boys and girls of every age,
Oh.
wouldn't you like to see some things strange?
Yep, Megafire.
That's the whole thing.
Saying that for us.
Oh, that's cute. I liked it. I had heard it before. I'd forgotten.
Okay. Yep, so we learned she is tall. We knew she was tall, but now we know how tall.
9 feet tall.
Which is tall.
Which is tall. I mean, they do say like as tall and a half as like an adult, which does pretty much put you around 9 feet. So
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, she's a big girl.
Yep.
How does she compare to Gorger in size? I don't remember because Gorger. Do we know how big the hallways are?
No, but I'm assuming 10 feet by 10 feet, like a Dungeons and Dragons.
Makes sense. So
corridor.
Gorger is just a gelatinous ooze.
Yes,
more or less.
That's how I'm imagining it anyway.
Yeah, that's a safe assumption, I think.
Yes, although in this case it's Sub Rosa who's absorbing the others into herself.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I wonder how she managed that.
Horrifically.
Just tossed him into her mouth.
Well, I mean, yeah, because it says that she has the hand attached to her hand, and there's a lump on her back, and that doesn't reach normally, so she must have dislocated whoever she put in there.
I think she must have like unzipped.
Yeah, probably got out of the cocoon.
Yeah,
and then
I wonder how she put them in.
Just scrunch up and
so
I don't know. And like it says the probably still alive in there too.
Well, I mean, the cocoon's entire purpose is to keep them alive, so she could literally just like rip them apart limb from limb, toss them into the cocoon, and they'll be fine.
In pain, but fine.
Yeah, in pain, but fine.
Yeah, it kind of really worm spoilers real quick. It reminded me very much of like the Bonesaw hybrid capes.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think we ever see Bonesaw doing this kind of thing where she like builds a suit out of another cape, unless I'm wrong.
No, I don't remember
in that just
turning a cape into something for another cape to wear. She mostly just like hybridizes them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like a thing that she could have done, and
yes,
Wildbow's, when he was writing this, was like, damn it, missed an opportunity for Bones. Let me do it here.
I feel like that's the entirety of Twig, yeah.
Yes.
I really enjoyed writing Bonesaw. How do I do this as a whole setting?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yep. I'm assuming that the one that got crunched up is the convict leader.
Narratively, it's what makes sense.
Yes.
Though I don't. I assume we're not going, unless the convict leader, because he kind of liked Sai, sort of at the end finds some way to betray Sub Rosa, and that's how we defeat her. I don't think we're going to really get any resolution on which convict is in there.
I don't think there's any way to tell anyway, so
yeah,
I guess we'll see.
We talked a bit already about how Gladys says that she is the cause of the horrible culture of the academy, and I feel like we've already agreed kind of that it probably was already there, but we kind of see it very much in her treatment of the convicts. The moment that they outlive their usefulness, take the parts that are useful, get rid of the rest. It's not necessary.
Sure.
And it's it goes very much hand in hand with what she was saying, or how she was described. She was rigorous, ruthless in deciding who got labs and who had their projects canceled early. It was all about the end result, nothing to do with the process. Didn't matter if you were sick or had a death in the family. If your wife was in the delivery room, you were expected to give your all, or she would replace you with someone who would. And this is really leaning into the punk element of the biopunk setting. The work culture where the corporation or the academy owns your life. Everybody is just easily replaceable drones. It's capitalism to the extreme.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of like this is capitalism when it doesn't like realize that it needs to sustain itself.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, you have all these initiative in corporate cultures about making sure that your workies work your workies your workers are happy enough that they stay. And not to just get every single drop of production out immediately. But in the end, like the return back to like having things like a maternity leave or bereavement leave is like also in the favor of capitalism, is just to make it a bit more sustainable.
Yeah.
It's not like a solution. It's like, in fact, if you take an accelerationist point of view, it's kind of actually worse because that means that like it'll continue even longer.
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting thing where it's like, okay, yeah, she was a bad part of the academy, but like now that they've like pulled back from being that entirely ruthless, like that just means that this horror is going to go on for longer.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I hadn't considered that at all. It also makes me think, what was the guy's name that was in the previous arc that Hale promised a lab to if he did
Cecil.
this? Cecil. Just again, I said last time that we met Cecil that he would not survive because he's like, oh, I have a friend who could use the lab also. It's like this woman would have had him
Yes.
out instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's lucky she isn't around.
Yep. Well, unless he's already down there in his lab.
Yeah, maybe he's down there with his friend.
He's
Digging.
one of the convicts.
I was gonna say he's one of the ones excavating. Yeah. I feel like there's more to say about the like parallels to modern capitalism here, but I don't have it.
I feel like you could just keep your eye on it, and it's something that's going to come up repeatedly throughout the entire work. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't hurt yourself too much of like having to have the answer right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
You can present your paper at the end of the week.
Anything else you want to talk about, Sub Rosa, either of you?
No, not myself.
All right. So the next big monster we have is Gorger, who we only see for like a couple of paragraphs, but he comes out of the corridor and starts swinging from the railings up the stairwell shaft. And it's like, this is the guy who couldn't even turn around. How is he swinging around like nimble as a monkey? Yeah. Apparently the square cube law doesn't apply as one of the ratios here. So
that's a great question, actually. I do wonder how they get around that, but I suppose it's like kind of magic.
Yeah, I mean, this whole setting is, you have to, suspension of disbelief. Mm-hmm. It looks cool glancing down and having the image of Gorger, dodging explosions and zooming up pillars and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah, and then
I thought that was a very fun image.
Yeah, no, absolutely was. And then we see him later again incapacitated by Spike, and we still don't know why this Spike is bypassing his things, and it kind of makes me wonder whether this was a Sub Rosa project to counter her other project, Gorger, just in case that the Academy sends Gorger after her. She has this like insurance.
I do wonder if it's just electricity, because he's just not immune to electricity.
Maybe, but it still feels like you have to get through all the layer of blubber and insulation and whatever.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if it's special magic electricity that these octopus eels create.
Maybe it is just because it's on a spike. The spike pierces into his not protected core and then electrocutes from there.
Potentially.
Yeah. I don't know. Gorger's really fun.
Yeah, he seems like a good guy. Most of the experiments run by the Academy seemed like kind of good guys.
Like decent folk. Yeah,
well,
dog
except for
catchers.
Sub Rosa and all that.
Well, yeah, but they're not. They're like torture gimps, pretty much. They're not
Yeah.
like employees.
The ones who work for the Academy are good guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of experiments, there are also the wall crawler things.
Those things were so cool.
They're creepy but cool, yeah.
Yeah.
I
And they
wanted,
do work like that sea animal. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
which sea animal do they work like?
It's a thing. Let me see if I can find
Is it a nudibranch or a different one?
branch.
Might be a different thing.
Extrude stomach.
The extruding the stomach is a starfish.
No, there's like a specific one that extrudes the stomach into like this geometric pattern. I'm not finding it quick. I'll keep looking for it eventually, and it'll come up eventually.
Yeah, I'm not even sure how to start searching for that, but I
Yeah,
definitely would want to know what real creature does that because it's pretty cool.
yeah. It's very much it like comes out in this geometric pattern, and then it like sucks it back in, and then hucks it out again. Maybe someone in the audience will know what animal that is.
I'm sure it'll be in the Discord within a day or two
Yeah,
of us posting this.
I should have looked it up beforehand.
You can put it.
Yeah, when it comes up, when I find it.
Yes.
Anyway, so yeah, the
But
humanoid
yeah,
things were sleek and black, like eels, gaunt. The things crawled on the walls. Where they touched the surface, earthworm-like tendrils snapped out, each tendril turning regularly at sharp right angles, never overlapping or coming too close to one another. The walls beneath their hands and feet became a maze-like pattern, snapping out into existence in a half-second, then disappearing just as fast as they moved forward. And also its tongue does the same thing later on.
hmm I'll be honest, I wasn't really paying super much attention the first time reading this, and I missed the part where it said that they were crawling on the walls. And so later, when they referred to wall crawlers, I thought that was something else. And so that we had these tendril monsters and the wall crawlers as being two separate things. And then it got really confusing and I had to go back. But yeah, so these guys are designed to be weapons, of course, like everything else. And their job is literally to just like make your skin fall off, which is
bad.
Because it's scary. Right?
Yes, because it's
Phobos
scary.
and Deimos approach, which is fear and terror. And yeah, just supposed to spook you.
Yeah.
Well, it's, straight up terrorism.
Yeah, I don't think. Do y'all think that in this alternative universe they had a Geneva Convention? Because I kind of get the feeling that maybe they dodged that one.
Probably.
I get that impression, yes.
Yeah.
Almost certainly.
Actually, does this take place before the Geneva Convention?
When was the Geneva Convention?
I thought it was in the 1800s, but I'm not certain. Geneva Conventions established.
Oh, it's 1864. Yeah. So I wonder if they dodged that.
I mean, yeah, the point of divergence is earlier.
Yeah, so it says that usually the term Geneva Convention refers to the 1949 version of the terms, which is, of course, after the divergence. So I don't know. I don't know which convention rules were in place back then, but I'm sure that they don't apply in this universe either way.
Yeah, for the first one they had it was for protecting wounded and sick soldiers, but that was probably before like chemical warfare, which I'm sure is what the second one's about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and now they're just like, oh yes, we'll protect them by assimilating them and turning them into stitched.
Right. All in the family kind of thing.
Yes.
I thought it was really odd that given their stated purpose, which is just be in a box, go out and do their thing, then come back, that they clearly have an established social structure.
Yes.
You know, they have the leader one that's a bit bigger and stronger, and like they understand they have a method of communicating with each other. I don't know if I'll call it a language necessarily, but seemingly something like it. And it kind of makes me wonder, are these based on some form of monkey? What's the origin of, what's the base creature of these things? Is there one? Is it, because I mean, that's how Helen beats them, is by exploiting that social structure and making herself so dangerous that they tell each other to not attack them.
Yeah, the Academy is a really big fan of like, what if a gun had a soul? like really like just taking every particular weapon and just being like, yeah, what if it was just like a bit sentient, so you like we should feel bad by using it, but we don't. Like every little thing.
Yeah, like those living ships we saw in
Like you could just have a ship. You could just have a boat. A boat is fine. It doesn't have to be alive.
Yeah, but the
You
thing
don't have
is,
to do that.
it's not as fun if the
That's
boat
true.
doesn't hate itself for doing what it's doing.
That's literally, I think that's probably one of Twig's particular. I think it's interesting. It's kind of like one of the core ethoses of the Academy is like the whole thing with Frankenstein's monster like coming back and killing him. That's like one of the ideal goals. That's like what we're shooting for, pretty much. We're shooting for Frankenstein's monster to come back and kill him, except he fails, and we get to make a second one that's even better at like hating himself and being more self-aware and fucking things up further. Like that's like I don't know. That seems essential. Like in Isle of Dr. Moreau, like when all the vivisected animal people come back and are trying to attack him, like that is also that's what we're going for.
Can't hear you, Tommy.
Emperor Palpatine is a member of the Academy. You know, he creates this biomechanical horror that comes back and kills him.
True, absolutely. Shit, you know what? Now I need to do a reading of Star Wars through the lens of Frankenstein. That's actually fascinating.
Amazing.
And on the other side of the other monsters that we saw, the other side of the coin, I guess, are the bugs created by Gladys and her partner. We still don't have a name for.
Nope.
The interesting thing there is the fact that they made it to be good or neutral.
Yeah.
When like obviously these are going to be used to kill people. Like how like fucking like they are pitching it to the Academy as a weapon, right? Like that's clearly like it's supposed to be a delivery system to deliver a weapon, and then on the side secretly they're like, oh, we could also use this to vaccinate people en masse. It's I don't know.
We've talked about this a few times in different episodes in the past, just how the Academy, you know, people are using the Academy as a way to, you know, the funding and the resources of the Academy to do their pet project, but on the side, it means sacrificing the things that they actually are passionate about doing for the sake of the I'm not sure what the right word is there, but you know, sacrificing their passion for the ability to be able to do their work.
Yeah, it's morals for power, basically.
Yeah, selling their souls.
The Faustian bargain. I feel like that's pretty relevant to Twig.
Absolutely. And it's like, I'm sure it's part of how people within the structure justify it to themselves. You know, it's like, sure, the Academy says we're going to be doing weapons, but, you know, it also has this other purpose that's a good purpose, which cancels out the fact that the Academy is doing horrible things with it.
Something to help her sleep at night.
Yeah. And I'm sure on some level it's going to be used in some places the way she hopes they do, but on the whole, I'm sure the balance is not in that favor.
Yeah, she'd have to be pretty naive to think that. Do we think that, aside from this, did we get the impression that Gladys was a naive sort of person? Because while she was pretty annoying,
I think the overall impression that we had from Sai's narrative was that she was a bitch. Like, I think that's the word he uses the most.
Yes.
Realized last time, it was because he had or at least I suggested, and Dante, you seem to agree with that, is that he did not like the realization that he himself was kind of into her and was like pushing back on that realization by calling her annoying and a bitch.
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and reread that section because it wasn't the text particularly about like he couldn't see what it was that had Gordon and the others so captured.
He's very, very adamant that he can't. So much so that it's clearly Sai lying to himself.
Fair enough.
At least, yeah, that was my reading of it, is that he's
he thinks he doth protest too much.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So there are two different kinds of bugs, one that does tranquilizer and one that does, what was the other one?
The other one is anesthetic.
Oh, right, yeah.
I don't think they were different kinds of bugs. They were just like
Different
different
payloads.
batches of the same bug with
Yeah.
different payloads in them. Yeah.
Sure.
And so, of course, they could easily put the flesh-eating virus gas in them, and
Is that the foreshadowing?
I mean, maybe. I think that was the wrong chapter for the foreshadowing, but it very well
Maybe.
might be as well. Yes.
So yeah.
That's all I have for monsters.
Me too. Unless there's Alexandra, do you have anything else to add about any of the
No,
monsters? Or
they were cool.
They were cool. I'm sure we'll see a few more before they leave the bowels too. For historical references, I only had a couple of phrases that I pulled out. Alexandra, you mentioned one of them, the Phobos and Deimos
yeah,
approach. Phobos and Deimos being the sons of Ares, the god of war, and their names meaning fear and terror.
Yep.
Um,
and it's interesting that seems to be like the name of this doctrine. You
oh
know,
yeah, that it's just a thing
they just
that
drop.
they
Yeah, it's
know
the Phobos and Deimos approach. Like obviously, you know what we're talking about. This is a thing that we use, a common
all the
term.
time. Yes.
Yeah, I mean it does feel of its time, this like reverence of the classics in a way, in like academia or historical academia.
Sure. Yeah. And then the other little quote was Sai. I forget exactly what it was, but it was like when Sai and Jamie were discussing plans and why it wouldn't work. And Sai said, "Therein lay the rub." And I was like, that is a Shakespeare quote. So Sai knows his Shakespeare, apparently.
Apparently, that's an interesting thing.
I didn't pull that out at all. That's cool.
Yes. So, yeah, that's from Hamlet, I believe. So, yeah, just a couple phrases. Nothing particularly spectacular, but just some interesting little things. But now we move on to characters.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a lot about our characters, but there's always more to say.
Yep. So first, obviously, is Sai.
Mm-hmm.
I pulled out Fear of the Dark, and I think it was. I don't really remember why I pulled it out. I think it was just I wanted to comment on the fact that Sai is not usually admitting to a lot of fears, and like he's not afraid necessarily of the dark here, but of like the things that are in the dark that he can't see and therefore can't anticipate or control.
The funny thing is that in this case, the things that you can't see in the dark are genuinely terrifying
Horrifying.
and dangerous.
Yep.
Yes.
And I also liked the quote very much right at the beginning, and it's just Sai talking to the scientists who are being wishy-washy about what these creatures are. No, I cut him off. No dilly-dallying, no shifting blame, no ego. What's wrong with your work? Be straight, be fast, or we might die. And I just,
Like, no patience for
for
anything.
anything, it's just, I know that you're about to be playing politics here. We don't have time for this. I am not the person that you need to be playing politics with.
Mm-hmm. I feel like he would have that attitude even if they weren't about to die.
Yeah, and he probably would be saying the same thing. We might die.
Mm-hmm. Including the part where he's like, "Oh, if it wasn't for Gordon, I would hold a knife to your throat to make you."
Yeah.
I feel like I haven't heard Alexandra in a while. You still?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Wasn't sure if you were being quiet or if your audio was out.
No, I just didn't have much to say about these particular sections.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
This is your note, I think, too, Tommy.
It was just that the conversation was sporadic, and it wasn't my focus that was faltering. Like you definitely get the feeling that everybody else is sort of like fading out and loopy and drunk, but Sai also is to a small degree. And again,
Sure.
he will not acknowledge or accept the thought that he is not in full control of his senses and his self.
That's true, but he did have that kind of giddy feeling in the last chapter where he got obsessed with butts for a little while.
Yeah, because he almost died.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't made that connection. I was just assuming that he was also slightly being affected by the tranquilizers.
Maybe.
Yeah, it could be both.
Yeah.
It's always both.
And I think Wildbow does a really good job of, I'm not sure what it is specifically in the text that changes, but there's this sort of feeling of like disconnectedness that is that comes through in the text.
Sure.
You don't sound like you agree.
I mean, I don't disagree. It's just I didn't notice that. So
Okay. I don't necessarily have more to say about that either.
Yeah,
Just
I feel like everybody was kind of like fading, and there was a lot of distractions going on with like the attacking bugs and
mhm.
wall climbers and so forth. So I don't know. I didn't get that impression, but it could be there for all I know. So
Yeah, it certainly could be a touch of that in there. Definitely something more present with Gordon. I do think in general, Sai is showing in his narration how he's not super actually aware of himself sometimes.
Yeah.
mhm.
Wasn't that like
Very
one of
often, yes.
the key points of Psy as a character versus Skitter as a character, wherein again some worm spoilers, uh Skitter very much lies to herself and to the audience, but does it well enough that we as the audience are just sucked in immediately, and we believe her in her self-justification. It takes some critical thinking to realize that she is not a reliable narrator even to herself, whereas Sai is kind of explicitly not as good at it,
At
Mhm.
lying to himself.
at lying to himself and at lying to the audience. We are aware, I think, of Sai not being as or not being as honest with himself as he thinks he is or claims to be.
Hmm. That'd be an interesting thing to keep an eye on going forward. I don't know if I entirely. I feel like he is a very good liar. That I have been bought into the things that he's said before, but also like there are definitely plenty of times where I've been like, "Oh, Sai, that is not what you're actually feeling. That is you are
Yeah.
totally. That is not what is happening, and you know it also."
Hmm.
Um,
I
so
wonder
I'm
if the
not
fact
sure.
that we're reading this closely and also being highly skeptical of him and laughing at him every chapter
Yeah, that's part of it.
is part
Um,
of it too.
he has the lambs, and the lambs are the ones that can read him better than he can read himself.
Mhm.
For sure. Which means he is never going to be separated from them ever.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
Obviously.
It'd be pretty bad, wouldn't it?
It'd be awful.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie told us very clearly that it isn't going to
It's
happen.
never going to happen.
I refuse to accept that it happens.
Well, it's not gonna, so don't worry about it.
Great, lovely.
Mhm.
That's not the foreshadowing. That's the wrong chapter for the foreshadowing, so it can't
Yeah.
be that. So yeah, we learn a tiny bit more on Wyvern as a project, or really a project name. And I don't know that I really read it, or if I understood this line well, because the way I read it or I interpreted it is, it says the Wyvern is the dragon with a barbed tail, which in I think heraldry and whatnot implies poison. I've been stung every month for years. Everything under the sun put into my body. I have tolerances. I'm kind of imagining it's like a Princess Bride style immunity to all the poisons. Is that
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that's what I got.
okay? I wasn't sure if that was the test or if it was just like figurative. Oh, I just have resiliences because that's what my project is, or if it was like actually here you're going to be injected with all these things and you build up resilience.
I think at this point we don't have a full understanding of what his treatments particularly or exactly are.
Yeah,
But definitely another good data point for that.
Mhm. We know it somehow involves being stung.
Hmm.
some of it. Yeah,
Or what is it that Jenny calls it? Do
I
you
don't
remember?
remember. No,
She had a word for being like injected or whatever, and that was like it was clearly like just the word that the nurses used for it. I hadn't really heard much, but I don't remember what it was. Oh,
I don't remember.
I don't know.
it's fine. It's fine. Um, I just also wanted to say like even if that is the reason that they named his project the Wyvern Project, like all the other meanings for
Oh
Wyvern
no,
that we've
yeah,
come up with are all totally valid
absolutely.
as well. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, it is very cool.
Yeah. So we kind of talked about the next portion already. What about manipulating some sap into doing it for us? I asked. God, Sai, really? He asked, incredulous, which I thought was kind of a thing that's like a joke that's only a joke if people don't like it. Um, but I thought it was interesting because he's still this was on the tail of suggesting self-sacrifice and genuinely like, no, we're not doing that.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I think
he still has this on his mind as like
an option.
this is a viable option, and I should be able. Do you remember when, um, I mean, of course you remember when they were invading Maur's church, and he was so jealous of Gordon and Helen
Yep.
for
Being
being the fake sacrifice.
Mhm.
So
And you think this is playing on that?
I think that wanting to be the hero, wanting to be the center of attention, might be a big part of the reason why he keeps thinking of self-sacrifice as a thing they should consider.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily feel qualified to talk about this, but I can see there being some degree of like suicidal ideation just to be done with all the struggles and the pain that the academy puts him through. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that as potentially a thing that someone might have as their reason, but I don't see it for Sylvester because I don't think we've seen any indication that he has
Mm.
that kind of attitude towards
I
his
don't know.
life. He seems pretty satisfied with it when he's not getting treatments. That's just my impression, though. I could be wrong.
I really don't know.
I feel like it's not my place to say anything here.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on for sure.
Will do.
Like, is Sai happy?
I mean, I think he can be happy in the moment, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's happy overall. And I don't know that I have enough to be able to say
Mm-hmm.
to answer beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He does have things to focus on and move towards, like
Yeah.
focus on Mary and his various tasks that aren't the world's boringest interview process ever.
Yeah, he
Mhm.
mentions it a couple of times that he's started a process of becoming Sylvester. It's something that comes up in Arc One, which I only mentioned because I read it again recently. And that's becoming himself. Is I think is probably one of those big things that he's driving toward.
Mhm.
The next thing that I put down, I already talked about, I believe, earlier, so we can move on past that.
Okay, sure. So, is there anything actually beyond that, though? Is there anything else you want to talk about regarding
Sylvester.
Sai?
I don't think so.
Cool.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I didn't really have much to say about Gordon, Lillian, and Mary either. I mean, they spent half of this section being unconscious in a lab
Yeah.
somewhere.
I just noticed that when they're looking over Sai or looking each other over for the, bug bites, Sai mentions or notices that Gordon has slightly different like skin or hair tones over his body. Just
Yes. Himself, Gordon himself and Jamie, all three of them.
yeah, and I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if there is anything to make of that yet, because I mean the assumption is very much not for me that they were stitched together parts of other you know 5 different children were made into a Gordon, um, but it's clear indication that something has been done to them and affecting their
Mhm.
skin and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. Jamie, we saw a lot of. We've talked about him
Quite a
quite a
bit.
lot already, to be honest. A lot of concern about Sylvester after his close brush with death. Um,
Yeah, poor Jamie's sensitive. He's a sensitive boy.
It's a good boy. Yeah, and I mean, we learn a lot about the experiment itself, or at least how it was done, not necessarily why it was done. Like, I mean, we learn that. Well, first off, we learn that Jamie has very understandable body issues, and that's why he has long hair, to hide the scars, and he doesn't like people seeing him, naked, which we've noticed before because of these scars. So Jamie had been born human, but they decided to make modifications. It had involved removing a part of his spine and brain, cloning the spine and brain with augmentations, and then replacing them. And, like, to me, obviously not being an academy scientist, that sounds less efficient than growing a whole Jamie as a clone. An entire augmented clone from scratch. Like, why? What would be the purpose of the surgical element of that rather than just having a fully augmented Jamie?
mhm.
I don't know. And
maybe,
then, oh, go ahead.
maybe it is just because it's an experiment. Like they haven't done it before. This isn't like, oh yes, we've made several of these and we've determined this is the best way to do it. Like maybe
Yeah,
they can't make a augmented clone from scratch. They
maybe. And I mean, I guess it's interesting to me that we're learning that every single one of the lambs was created with a different method.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought at first it seemed like all the lambs minus Helen were part of a group, and that Helen was added later on as part of a deal with Ibit and all that. But it really does seem like it's just a bunch of different. Each of them are their own unique individual experiments going into the whole Gestalt experiment that is the lambs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why I was kind of thinking earlier in this book that I wasn't sure if Hale was responsible for all of the projects or just
Yeah,
for Sylvester's, because they are so different.
it seems I guess likely that Hale is in charge of both the lambs as an experiment as a whole and Psy specifically as a member of the lambs, whereas the rest of them might be other people's projects.
That's a very interesting thing I hadn't thought about before. Particularly like, I mean, you go to Jamie and his appointments, and he has like a dozen scientists or whatever. So it's very
Yeah,
clear. Like, I feel like it's very easy for us to be like, oh yeah, Hale probably just delegated someone to them. I don't know exactly how it is with Gordon, but I know that he has more than Cy does. Cy has the
yeah,
least, and Cy's like primary professor is Hale. So it kind of is like Cy is sort of like the primary child of Hale in a way.
yeah,
I
Mhm.
hadn't considered that at all.
yeah. And I mean, it kind of sheds a bit of a different light on. I think it's arc one. They talk about that relationship where Psy sees Hale as a sort of father figure in a way
Yeah.
that I don't think the other lambs do.
Mhm.
That's interesting. Yeah, does I think the question I would ask most with Gordon, does Gordon see Hale as a father
Yeah,
figure? I don't know.
Mhm. I think that I would have assumed that Hale was responsible for all of them if it wasn't for the fact that Helen has
Ibit.
Dr. Ibbot.
Hmm.
But yeah, the fact that they are so different does kind of feel like
Different, like
there's like different people designing them, different people.
it's like here we
Um,
have this project that we're trying to make these lambs. Submit your proposal for your contribution to this departmental project that we have.
mhm. Yeah, and poor Jamie got the ones that was the
Yeah,
most complicated and difficult, it
yeah.
seems.
He turned around and I saw how the scars reached around to embrace him, and the healing had been poor. It had gotten infected, I knew, and there had been other priorities than getting the tissue to heal perfectly, which is absolutely wild to me that making sure there's no infection is not a priority. Because if Jamie dies of sepsis, then there is no Jamie experiment.
I've taken that as just they just didn't care about the skin. Like the actual like they were preserving the parts that make him have his abilities, but like it didn't matter how it looked.
Okay,
Hmm.
sure,
Yeah, like if the brain gets damaged but the skin is fine, then that's as useless to them.
true. I guess I did the text. Yeah, the text does imply that it's specifically the skin that they didn't really care about it healing perfectly.
Hmm.
I kind of had read it as a whole, like it didn't matter if the experiment healed, but no, it just rereading it, it does seem like the skin, and it doesn't matter if Jamie's crippled in a way
Hmm.
because Jamie's not meant to be a combat.
Combatant or anything.
Yeah,
He's
And
just a
also
little
like
thinker with a little
yeah,
book.
if his skin is like horribly infected or whatever, they can just replace it with fungus, like we saw with
Mauer,
Mauer, so long as his remembering skills are intact.
which leads into the next segment. Very casually, he doesn't remember Sub Rosa.
Hmm. And like at first you're like, okay, Jamie, he remembers things, but surely like missing one person is not a big deal. But he remembers how many times he has seen the picture of Sub Rosa,
Yeah, which is
which
scary
is
because.
such a wild detail to
Mhm,
remember. So
Hmm.
much more precise than remembering someone's face, I
yeah,
think.
But the problem
absolutely.
was that he didn't make the connection.
Yeah,
Yes.
which I guess is, I mean, a flowers for Algernon type moment there a little bit, where maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it feels like potentially Jamie is nearing that expiration date, and like the experiment is starting to break down a little bit.
Well, that was Jamie's fear, I believe.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, and that's scary.
Yes. I wonder what other stuff he might be
Forgetting.
forgetting. Because he seems pretty tight on all the other details, like even going through like all of the labs and what they're in and what their projects are and blah blah blah.
Well, I feel like there was a few that he said he was not sure about, or unless I'm misremembering.
Yeah, but those were the ones that he wasn't involved in, that the other people had.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And
Okay.
he even remembered like, there were 202 of them
Mm-hmm.
that he had been part of, and two labs that had been unoccupied. And
Yeah. The other possibility there is that there's a deliberate block in place to not remember her for whatever
oh,
reason.
that's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of that, but that actually sounds very plausible.
Like, yeah, I mean, for all we know, she was involved and she didn't want him remembering her because his whole thing is remembering. And for someone who's cultivating a culture of secrecy and backstabbing, having a person who remembers everything there all the
Hmm.
time is dangerous.
Or even something like Shipman, Uncle Shipman,
Yeah.
having a connection in the Caterpillar office, being like,
I see what you're doing there.
let's
Shipman, Gladys does bugs, a caterpillar's a bug. Jamie is therefore.
oh.
Jamie's a bug.
Yep.
Jamie is a Shipman experiment.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, I mean, sorry for spoilers, but the last couple arcs of Twig is Sylvester turning into a dragon. That is like
Naturally.
that's his final form. So
He has a hoard of badges that he sleeps on.
Yes.
Helen turns into a statue. Gordon joins Sylvester in the sky as a griffin.
Yep. And then Jamie turns into a butterfly.
And Mary and Lillian are just standing around being like,
Like, what now?
what's going on?
What's next? All right. And then, is there anything else you want to talk about Jamie here?
Nothing. That's all. If you want to say anything about Helen,
Yep.
you do that.
Sounds good. Go for it. These are not
Oh,
mine.
I
That's
forgot
yours.
to import. I forgot to import the quote from there. Yeah. So Helen, we knew already that she was vat grown, but we
Yep.
got more. That was essentially just the thing about, everything about her is made different. Her brain is different. Her skin is different. Her muscles are different. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we always joke about her being secretly an octopus.
Yep.
But it is, the thing that really intrigues me about this whole idea is that this is the level of twig technology that we're at, right? We can create someone with entirely custom everything and have her be not only functioning, but like better than functioning in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And yet all of the other projects are just like miscellaneous, weird, half functioning, kind of useless,
Slapdash.
falling apart. And it's like Helen is like orders of magnitude above everyone in
Well, that's why
quality
Ibet's a
of
genius,
construction.
right?
Yeah, and I mean, Ibet is like famous for being incredible,
Yeah.
but the fact that what he makes is that much beyond everything else
It's
is
as
like,
if someone right now released like the Terminator as a product
mhm,
compared to like all the robots that exist.
mhm. Yeah. So it just kind of boggles my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
That level of precision in Helen's construction.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree with you. I thought it was interesting that she says, I'm going to hold the vial because I am physically incapable of dropping it.
Well, she says it physically incapable of dropping it by accident,
Okay, well, yes.
which
That
is
is an important
an
caveat.
important distinction.
For sure.
It'd be pretty bad if she couldn't drop it at all.
Yeah, but it's showing more that she is something that is not biologically human, but looking like human. I'm not going to say she's not human because she absolutely is, but not biologically a Homo
Mhm.
sapien.
Yeah, I wonder if it's because she's like in control, like because she's so much in control of herself that she couldn't like do it accidentally because she can't do things accidentally,
That's kind of the feeling I got,
or if
but
it's just like she kind of like locks into place or something, or
yeah, but I think it goes It's what she does. Sorry, I'm articulating, or this is coalescing as I'm coming. I'm hoping it comes together properly. But she can't do big explosive movements when she's fighting. She has to grab and pull and tighten. So she has the what's it called? The it feels like she has the opposite type of musculature than we do, and I'm going off of very half remembered stuff here, but fuck, what's the word? But just the I haven't gone to the gym in so long that I don't remember any of these words. Um, but just in terms of how we move and how we do things, we're good at like burst movements and burst activity, and it
Okay.
feels like she is the opposite. And I don't
Hmm.
remember what that is called, unfortunately.
I don't know what it's called,
Um,
but I understand what you mean.
yeah, like for example, an alligator has incredible strength closing its mouth, but almost none in opening it.
Right.
So if you hold, one can hold an alligator. I've seen videos, and this might be a stretch because it might be fake of that extreme.
That's true. Yeah,
But
and it's something with a lot of animals.
yeah,
And in general, their muscles are made to clamp down, not necessarily to be opened.
yeah, I've seen a picture that those saying might be fake is of a crab holding an alligator's mouth shut with its pincer, and that might be not a real picture. I'm not going to assume that it is real, but I've heard of that kind of thing where they if an
what
alligator is coming for you, hold its mouth shut.
So what you're saying is that Helen is really good at opening her mouth wide, but can't clamp
Yeah,
her mouth shut
yeah.
because she's the opposite
Yes,
of an alligator.
essentially. No, the alligator will try to die. She's an octopus. But yeah, and I think it is part of what you're saying that she has that absolute control over herself.
Hmm.
It's going to frustrate me until I find that later on.
Yeah.
Um,
And then there was also the whole interaction with the wall crawlers.
yeah, we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but yeah,
Hmm.
there's I think more to say about her kind of subverting or like inserting herself into their power structure or social structure as a
Hmm.
quote unquote alpha.
Yeah, just like the fact that I felt like it was very intuitive for her
Yeah,
to just be like,
or
I,
just
I sort of get where these creatures are coming from and can relate to them. And we kind of did talk about that with her being like able to relate to all the monsters.
yeah.
Um, but it was pretty cool seeing her like in action, fighting with them on their level in her own way. It was very cool.
I did also think it was kind of weird that Sai uses the doll metaphor or doll simile multiple times throughout this arc as to describe her looking like she looks like a creepy doll. She looks like a you know horror doll or whatever.
Yeah, well, that was the paste on her face,
Yeah, but
right?
it's more than just that. It comes up multiple times.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't
I
necessarily
thought
know what
I
to say
thought
on
it
that.
I thought it was just commenting on the look of her face covered in paste. Um,
Maybe
but that plus her usual kind of stillness definitely would be
unnerving.
more unnerving than someone else with their face covered
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, I feel that um Helen as a doll motif does come up pretty often. I mean, she's someone with like literally opposable joints. And
Mhm.
her expression is carefully controlled, where she can make it look like whatever she wants. I feel like, particularly if you want to look at uh, her creator, his name is um Ibit.
Yeah.
Sorry, it took me a second.
No
It's
worries.
the way that he treats her. Perhaps you could also compare that to a doll. Definitely
Wait,
something that you should
keep an eye on.
keep in mind. Yeah, keep in mind, especially when you have other interactions where she's being particularly doll-like or being posed by other people.
If I may
Mhm.
also just add real quick to that, just the name of her project, as you brought up like not 10 minutes ago,
Yes.
is
Yeah,
a reference to that
yeah,
too.
to become a statue that her
Yeah.
Galatea.
creator can fall in love with.
Yep.
That's
Which
Galatea.
actually is a really creepy implication.
For a bit, yes.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But yeah, no, that's the whole Pygmalion thing. Galatea is a cool name. I like it. It feels like it's be a good name for like a superhero or something.
Yeah, I can see that.
Right. And then we talked a little bit earlier about Jamie's thoughts about the expiration dates. And I think it's Helen doesn't have one, right? Or does she? I
No,
don't
she
remember.
does.
Yes, he says, I don't know
Uh,
if I've been preparing, but I've been thinking about it a lot. Just like mortality and her own end there.
mhm.
I thought she potentially was one of the ones who didn't. I don't know why I'm remembering that, but I
No,
could
I'm
be
pretty sure she was second last.
okay. You
It
might
was
be right.
just Lily and Mary who didn't have them because they wouldn't.
Yeah,
Just like they don't have project names.
you're probably right.
See, now I kind of want to wonder, like, what would their project names be
Mm-hmm.
if they were to have one?
I would have. I don't know. I kind of feel like Mary would be like Project Cuckoo. It's like the cuckoo
Okay, that's a
puts
good one.
its
Yeah, that
plants
would
its
make sense.
plants its eggs in the nest and then replaces the original child.
Yeah, if you want to look at her particular struggles, I feel like just straight up calling her a puppet wouldn't be a bad start as well.
Well, that's true.
As it's not as mythological as the other ones.
Especially since a puppeteer is her.
Call it
Um,
Project Marionette or something.
yeah. Oh shit! Yeah, the marionette Mary thing actually would work quite well.
Oh, I didn't even think occur to me. It was just Marionette
Yeah, yeah,
sounded Marionette just sounded more like regal, I guess, or like formal than puppet.
it would make sense.
Yeah.
It suits. I mean, better than Project Pinocchio. I feel like that's more of a side project name.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Lillian would just be like Project Intern or something dumb like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Well, I mean, we're happy to ask people for a Lillian one. It's always fun if people want to give us
A bonus
suggest
discussion
those
question.
type of deal. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to y'all's discussion questions.
Yeah, we're almost there. Getting there. Um, you've already mentioned Alexandra. What Helen steps up to fill that gap where Sai isn't and the others aren't. So yeah, let's move on. So we've already talked about how the scientists, even here, they don't get names, but they're just here trying to deflect the blame on the issues that they have.
Yeah. Even the German one doesn't have a name.
Just an accent. But I kind of think that goes hand in hand with Gladys's partner, who seems to be caring more about years of work gone to the wind than the fact that they're in imminent danger. And
Yes,
to me, it just seems like both these people have lived with the privilege of being Academy scientists for so long. They have not really internalized the fact that death is a danger for them.
sure.
Like, I don't have much more to say about that. It just feels like to them, they don't have, neither of them feel like they're threatened.
Which is
Hmm.
interesting to me because I mean, aren't they down in the bowels where people do like die all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
weren't
that,
they just talking about how Sub Rosa made the bowels this whole thing where everyone's position is precarious constantly?
yeah, but their attitude does not reflect that, it
No, it
seems.
doesn't.
Maybe they've come to terms with their own mortality and they're pretty like
They just
blasé about it themselves. Like, yeah, I might get like gotten by a flesh-eating virus one day by accident in the academy. That's just how it goes. Shit
As
as
sucks.
long as
long
I get as long as I get these mosquitoes bred before then.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's potentially, and I mean that ties into thematically the rest of the talk about mortality in this arc.
Hmm.
So it could just be Wildbow setting us up emotionally or mentally a little bit to be not caring about death as much. I don't know.
He is good at showing like a multitude of attitudes towards something that he's exploring.
Yeah.
So that definitely could be part of it.
Hmm.
In terms of other people here, I thought it was interesting that Gladys herself, being such an important character in this part of the story,
Hmm.
barely gets a mention in these chapters. Like, she's unconscious for half of it, and in the other half, all she really does is give a couple of info dumps about
Yep.
her mosquitoes and about Sub Rosa, and that's all she does.
And also be pedantic about it.
Sure, yes.
Yep. She corrects Sai about what her bugs do. They sting. They don't bite.
Honestly.
Ugh, how could you not know this?
Yeah, and they're venomous, not poisonous.
Yeah. All right. So before we move on, is there anything either of you would like to say something you thought of since then before we move into the discussion question about any character or the plot or the setting or
I've said everything that I've thought of for these 2 chapters.
cool. What about you, Dante?
I think I have as well.
Wonderful.
We've spoken a lot. It's been nearly 2 hours, so I think it is time for us to get to our discussion questions.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So we had 3 discussion questions going on, 2 official ones and 1 sort of secret one. The secret one was, what would be a word for death by one's own experiment? And we got an answer from Hobo Demon, who said, a word for a doctor's death by their experiment would have to be conjugated in the exonerative case, normally reserved for reference to the misdeeds of politically friendly occupying forces such as BART cops. I'd argue for mispractice as a tuvix of misadventure and malpractice.
I like it.
That's delightful.
I like
like it too.
mispractice, yeah. Also, I like the usage of the word tuvix as a synonym for portmanteau here. All right. So our first discussion question is: besides Sylvester, what cartoon characters, Looney Tunes or otherwise, are the lambs based on? So before we get into the discussion, the answers here, do you have a thought on that, Alexandra, real quick? Just
I
throwing
never
it out
considered
there.
that angle. I would say Helen is what's the woman in Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That's what Helen's up to. Yeah.
Okay. I don't remember the name, but I know which one you're talking about.
Not really, but sure.
Sure.
Jessica Rabbit.
Jessica Rabbit, that's the one.
Yep. So Sweet Manzana says that Jenny established Sylvester as Sylvester and Jamie as a Tweety Bird, or as Tweety Bird, sorry, not a Tweety Bird. For the rest, Lillian as Penelope, Gordon as Sam Dog, Helen as Elvira, and Mary as Henry Hawk.
Yes, and Sweet Manzana was the one who introduced this question in the first place. And we've been sitting on that answer for a good long time now. Unfortunately, I'm really not familiar with Looney Tunes, so these could be perfectly apt or completely out there, and I wouldn't know, unfortunately. Only a Sandwich says Jamie is Porky Pig, mostly a quote-unquote straight man, but also has a goofy side, is way more competent than people usually think. Helen is Michigan J. Frog, some manner of abomination in a cute exterior, has a hidden secret that only a few ever see. Key feature is agility, but their greatest weapon is in mental and emotional damage. I think that's pretty great.
Yep. And Hobo Demon says, there's a fan art somewhere of the lambs in the style of the Scooby-Doo gang, and Jamie is absolutely a gender-bent Velma, relatively passive, bookish, reliable, and doing what he can to make Sylvester feel like Johnny Bravo. If you could share that with us, I would love to see it.
That sounds amazing. I'm going to look it up right now.
Okay, so while you do that, I'm going to move on to our next discussion question, which is, tell us your favorite use of faking someone's death in fiction. So Dante has an answer here.
I started with an answer to that. So one of my favorite audio dramas, I listen to a lot of audio dramas, and one of my favorites is The Amelia Project, which is a comedy audio drama about a secret organization that specializes in faking people's deaths. And it's delightful. Like it's all like, politicians, celebrities, even an AI at one point, they fake its death.
Okay.
And like the interviewer who is like, it's all the interview between, the Amelia Project interviewer and the person who wants their death faked. They're just,
go ahead.
And they're just like discussing with each other, like, what do you want? How do we want to do it? We'll fake your death in this manner, and then we'll give you this new identity, and then it all wraps up, and they have some Veuve Clicquot and celebrate, and it is absolutely delightful, and I love it. So,
is the name The Amelia Project derived from Amelia Earhart, who famously
It very well may be. Amelia is the name of one of the characters, but
okay,
I absolutely think that she could be named after Amelia Earhart for sure.
Sure. So my answer is Romeo and Juliet, just because of the sheer absurdity of the rotating faked deaths in that.
That is an excellent answer, yes.
All right.
Alexandra, do you have an answer for this one?
I don't have a prepared answer for a favorite use of faking someone's death.
No
That's
worries.
all right.
Right, Hobo Demon. This Mind Game did a really surreal version of faking a death, though it's entirely possible that it's an entirely narrator getting a contact high off of all whatever the Yakuza who kills him is on.
Sweet Manzana says, after I theorized Twig and Jack Slash might have both been inspired by the 70s manga Blackjack, which follows an unlicensed super surgeon, I started reading it, and these stories are pretty wild. He helps fake a death on the very first issue, where this young rich guy is driving around like a maniac for no reason, gets into an accident where he destroys most of his organs, so his father hires Blackjack because no one else can save him. Jack says that he can do it by transplanting most of the organs from one person to his son, killing that person in the process. The father uses his money to get a guy named Davy that saw the accident blamed for it, and they give him the death penalty, so they're going to use him to save the son. But instead, Jack gives Davy plastic surgery to look like the son, and all the money the father paid for the surgery so that he can run away with his family.
That is wild.
That's amazing, and I love it.
Sir Kotak says, well, I think I have to put up some spoiler tags because the question requires a spoilery answer. With that first being the name of the author, second one name of the story, and the third one being the specific event, but it's from a different Wild Bow story, specifically from a little web serial called Pale. And if you read it, you know where I'm going because, of course, it's, where's 2.7? No, 2.Z, sorry.
22 points.
Oh, you hid that from me. Because, of course, it's
It was
22.Z.
spoiler.
You did spoiler it for me. I was trying to, real quick, wait, what? Which chapter is that? I don't... Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now we've spoiled everybody on that, so sorry.
Nah.
I also wanted to mention that Claw, Wild Bow's new web serial, definitely does the new identity thing explicitly.
Mhm.
And as such, it seems pretty likely that it's the sort of story where faking deaths is going to happen. Kind of goes hand in hand.
Let's say pretty explicitly so, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And Alexandra, you suggested our new discussion question, if you'd like to.
Yeah. Well, just a simple one. Not really super thematic or anything. I was just wondering, which one of the Lamb's abilities would you want to have?
That's a great question.
And I would love to hear about y'all's answers. I don't know if you'll have an immediate one or one later.
I think we should save our immediate ones for next time anyway.
Well, since I won't be there, I think I would probably like size the most, actually. It's the closest to my own experience, I suppose. If I wanted to shore it up, my own faults, I would take Jamie's, absolutely, because my memory is already garbage. But
just ask for all of them.
Yeah.
While you're at it.
Just be
I'm kidding.
Gestalt of all the lambs.
Yeah. But I think this would be very, very fun. Of course, all the other ones have their merits too. I would love to be strong in all those things like Gordon, or have the focus to accomplish anything I want to, like Mary, or even just have Academy know-how like Lillian. It'd be fucking awesome.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Or be an octopus like Helen.
Yeah. I mean, I do very much. Yeah, I get her urges to crush and squeeze.
Yeah. All right. So, unless anyone else has anything else to say, which I assume no, we'll move out into our outro.
I don't.
Oh, Dante, you put.
Oh, you've been asking for what have you been watching, reading recently, and I thought I'd put that in
Okay.
the script if you want to.
I don't have anything that I can think of off the top of my head that I've particularly been suckered into recently. How about you?
No, not even Claw.
Not yet. Give it
Okay.
time. Give it time.
I was reading A Wrinkle in Time.
Fun.
And the sequels to that, and I thought they were really relevant to the state of the world today, and a lot of the things that I think about in day to day. They were really. I hadn't read them as a kid, so they really were hitting me now pretty hard.
Oh, wow.
Is this your first time reading them?
Yeah. All the stuff about love being the most important thing, and how the world is sort of being subsumed by, I don't know, a conceptual trend to like submitting to greater institutional power, essentially. It was really hitting me really hard. As a different thing, not a book, something that I'm going to reference in your the little bio fact. I watched Secrets of the Muck, which was a documentary which you can find on YouTube about sea animals in this one particular region of the ocean floor in Southeast Asia. Highly recommend. Lots of really pretty glowing sea slugs and such.
Cool.
Very
Good
cool.
stuff.
What's it called?
Secrets of the Muck.
Do you mind linking that, Dante, in the
Sure.
show notes?
Yeah,
Yep.
I can do that after the call.
Cool.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah.
For me, last night I went to see a play adaptation of
Yeah.
Murder on the Orient Express, which was an incredible adaptation, to be honest. So for any of our listeners who aren't familiar with that, it's Agatha Christie's probably most famous popular novel, or
Yeah,
certainly
definitely.
Hercule Poirot. The mystery happens on a train, and when they pulled the curtain open and revealed the interior of the train on set, it was very impressive. It was like it's beautifully done. Like the Orient Express in the book is supposed to be this extremely luxurious and beautiful train, and they really did a good job of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when the train starts moving, the set of the train started moving.
Wait, does it
They had built
it rocks or
2
what?
whole cars on the set, and they would move them back and forth
Wow.
across the stage so that whichever car the action was in would be on the stage.
So
That's
cool.
crazy.
Just when it started moving across the stage, it was amazing. It was just so well done.
Wow.
So yeah, definitely got me bought back into that book, and I'm going to be rereading it again because yeah, it was pretty incredible.
I'm just going to try to track down Wrinkle in Time. I read those when I was young, and I don't remember them well, and I don't.
They're really, really
think-
beautiful. I just finished A Wind in the Door too.
Okay.
The first sequel. Apparently, there's 5 of them. I had no idea they had sequels. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I just have no. I remember reading them, and I remember liking them, but I have no memory of them, and I'm sure as a child I did not read it with any understanding of the subtext or the.
Oh, for
Well,
sure.
the subtext is just that love is the most important and most powerful force in the universe, and it's just a continued exploration of that.
Okay.
There's a lot of reasons why it was resonating with me in particular right now, but they'd be too much to get into in a little section of another person's podcast.
Well,
Sure,
this is the part of the script where we get you to plug your stuff. So
That's true.
we're putting you on the spot anyway.
Well, I don't have anything to plug just yet. But at some
Wrinkle in
point,
Time
I
podcast.
will be doing dissecting Twig as well. Yeah, which I'm excited for. That'll be. I'm very confident that there's a pretty wide range in how to approach this book.
Sure.
And I'm very excited for to contrast different approaches and different interpretations of things.
I am very much looking forward to listening to that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, especially to sort of see what we missed.
Yeah, it'll just be very different. I don't know if will have missed much. You're going in a very a granular approach where I think you're turning over every stone, which I think is really cool. I think my boyfriend and I might be maybe doing it. He's very excited about it, and I feel like the themes and such will resonate with him very, very strongly. As much as they have with me, and it's one of my most important to me books. But it'll be very particular. We have a particular set of lived experiences that I think a lot of other people don't.
That's really
which is
cool.
what we'll be approaching it with.
Very cool.
Very excited to listen to that whenever you do it.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So thank you again, Alexandra, for coming on, and thank you everybody for listening. We hope you'll continue along with us for this trip into Twig, which you can read along with us at twigserial.wordpress.com. And if you do, or even if you don't follow with us, please go to Wildbow's Patreon at www.patreon.com/wildbow and support them. It's how we can produce all of these great stories and settings and inventive new worlds like Alberta. Answers to our discussion question in our Reddit thread.
Yes. So as always, you can reach us at totwigpodcast@gmail.com. totwigpodcast on the platform formerly known as Twitter, the Reddit thread, as you said, in r /parahumans, and the discussion thread in the Doof Discord. Kind thanks, as always, to them. And to you, Alexandra, you're the third consecutive Doof affiliated guest we've had.
I see.
Um,
Well, I'm very excited to go back and listen to those other episodes because I hadn't quite caught up when y'all had mentioned.
For sure. So yeah, thanks to you and the other members of Doof for letting us squat in your Discord. And
it's a nice place. Nice place, good community.
Place. Very fun people,
Absolutely.
good discussion.
And I'm just throwing this at you real quick. Dante, I did a quick check, but there are two chapters left of the arc, and then the interlude. So I'm suggesting we do 3 next time. Just so that we end an arc on the arc rather than...
Okay, here's what I'll say. Next episode, we'll cover Lip Sealed, 3.9, 3.10, and possibly 3.x. And if not, we'll do 3.x on its own.
Yeah, because I feel like it would be weird to do end
of
an
we're definitely not going to do 3.x and 4.1. That would be weird. Cool. And we've never done anything weird before.
Nope.
An anti-weirdness podcast, I understand.
Yes.
It's the way it just goes.
We're very serious people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, for our biology or punk fact, Alexandra has kindly provided one if you'd like to.
Yeah, so in Secrets of the Muck, I got to watch a video of 2 sea slugs mating. Which
how erotic.
It kind of actually was, like it really, I mean, we were stoned, so that was part of it, but like it just seemed actually very intimate because it's these 2 appendages that almost look like lips on stems, and they were kind of like handshaking with them or making out, like it looked like just lips kissing, which I just thought was fascinating to watch. And then after that goes on for a while, I suppose they get aroused enough, and then one penetrates the other with a love dart.
Is that this technical term?
I think that's a colloquial term. I think there's a complicated term, but the point is just look up videos of sea slugs mating. Watch Secrets of the Muck. That's my recommendation. And watch sea slugs make out and then stab each other, penetrate each other, with love needles. Really the ideal romance.
Clearly. All right, everybody. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Sorry, give me one moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear him in the background.
Poor sweet baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know why he doesn't usually cry at night.
Maybe he has things to say about Twig and you're not letting him be involved.
Definitely.